My husband's gone missing after reading my secret journal from college. If someone told me that a journal I wrote in college would destroy my marriage years later, I would have laughed in their face. And yet, here I am, lost and broken, trying to make sense of my husband's disappearance after reading my darkest secret. Hello, my name is Emma. We have been married for 7 years to my husband, James. From the outside, we were the dream couple, stable, happy, and full of plans for the future. Or at least that is what I would have thought before I became disenchanted with the process. All went well until a flare of my previous misconducts, written in my college journal, came alive into the scene. James found the journal a few weeks ago while cleaning out the attic. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, who doesn't have embarrassing memories from college? But then I saw his face when he was reading it. He wasn't just shocked, he looked completely betrayed. It wasn't just a harmless story from my younger years. It was something I'd deliberately kept from him. And now, my entire life is unraveling. I'm here because I don't have any better ideas or any other place to be right now. I am so sorry for whatever that has made us come this far, and I do not know how to make it right again. I just want someone out there to advise me because I feel like I'm losing everything. When I first met James, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. It was one of those chance encounters that could have easily never happened. He was the kind of man who stood out in a room, not because he was flashy or loud, but because of his quiet confidence and warmth. He had this way of making everyone feel seen and valued, and from the moment we started talking, I felt like I could tell him anything. It is true that we were introduced by a friend through a party, but what I can say is that we felt like we have always known each other. He was funny, he was real, and very polite. Late into the night, we discussed all but our childhood, our present jobs, our aspirations in the future. And I'm thinking hysterically, could this be what it means to finally meet the one, the soulmate the world is always raving about? Over the years, our bond grew stronger. We built a life together that felt almost too good to be true. James was the type of husband who would surprise me with coffee in bed, cheer me on when I was chasing my dreams, and remember the little things that made me happy. He worked hard to provide for us, and always went the extra mile for the people he loved. The thing that I personally admire about James was that he has this stainless moral fiber. For him, honesty was doing what was right the time that it was not easy. He was not a man who cheated or compromised. If he said something he would do, then he would do it. Yet that moral certainty expressed itself as zero tolerance for infidelity. He had always been clear about how much the word trust mattered to him, and about his conviction that truth was the cornerstone of any relationship. Looking back now, I can't believe how much I took that trust for granted. That ugly journal is something that I hadn't remembered for years. It was something I used in college and then put it in a box and stacked the box in the attic, not to be seen for years. I would not even remember that it exists at all. For me, it has become only a reminder of my wild student days and unnecessary experiments. But inside that journal was a secret, a reckless mistake I made during a time in my life when I was immature and careless. I had never told James about it, not because I wanted to lie to him, but because I thought it didn't matter anymore. It was something I had put behind me, something I had convinced myself was better left buried. Several weeks back, James planned to give the holiday needed serious cleaning in the attic after so many years. No, he was one of those creative zenners, which means he had to organize things that we have been accumulating over the years. At that moment, I did not give it much thought. I had other things on my hands, and truth be told, I was just relieved he was willing to handle the cleanup. I was in the kitchen when I heard him call out, "Hey, what's this?" I climbed up, and seeing him sitting on the floor with the journal in hand, greeted me. I froze for a moment, but cuffed the feeling away instantly, as it was the last thing I needed in such a situation. I thought to myself, it's only an old notebook that I was carrying around. What's the big deal? I even told him that he remarked that it was probably full of early college embarrassing musings. But then he opened it. At first I wasn't worried. I thought he would leaf through it, maybe have a good chuckle at some of the stupid things I'd written, and then toss it aside. But as he began to read, I observed his facial features transform some way. His face changed from happy to bewildered, and finally to sadness. "Emma," he said, his voice tight, "what is this?" The last part took me a second to understand what he was really referring to. I know I hadn't thought about that particular entry for years. A sudden feeling of dread came over me as I thought about what I wrote about one night in college, where I drank and did things I should not have done, and told myself that I don't count that night because it was way back. I tried to explain, but the words felt hollow even as I said them. James, it was a long time ago. I didn't even remember writing that. It didn't mean anything. But he wasn't having it. He continued to turn the pages of the journal, going from one entry to the other. Every page of the document seemed to knock the wind out of him. And the worst part? This is the time I noticed that he was made to understand that I had been concealing all this from him. Which was that for all these years, I still had not said the words to him that he was my love. The man who had always looked at me with so much love and admiration now looked like he didn't even recognize me. And honestly, I didn't recognize myself either. That moment was a game changer as far as I was concerned. "Oh, that?" I said casually, trying to mask the unease creeping in. "It's just an old journal from college. Nothing exciting." "Not important?" His voice was sharp, cutting through my weak attempt to dismiss it. He read the entry out loud, his tone growing colder with every word. It was a detailed account of a night in college, a reckless, thoughtless mistake I'd made, one that I had buried and convinced myself didn't matter. But now, hearing it in his voice, it felt impossible to minimize. "You never mentioned anything about this," he said. His stare was piercing through me. I tried to stay calm, but my voice wavered. "James, it was a long time ago. It didn't mean anything. I didn't even remember writing about it." It was about my college affair while I was going out with James, and also with this other guy. I wasn't actually sure about James, but I knew he wanted to be exclusive, so when Alex asked me out, I said yes and lied to James. I wrote all my confusing feelings in that journal and the moments that I had spent with Alex. I used to write everything we had done together, and how I used to feel when I was with him. But the thing is that it was about the time when I was a college student, and in college we are not so sure about what we are doing. I thought I really loved Alex, but the thing is that he actually dumped me. After he was out of college, he started working at this local coffee shop. He was basically the manager of that coffee shop. He met this girl, Lisa, and started going out with her. I never wanted to tell this to my husband because it wasn't worth it. I was over it. Then again, James questioned, "What has happened to you? That's your excuse?" he asked, frustration creeping through his veins. "It didn't mean anything. You didn't think it was worth mentioning that you—" He paused, his hands clutching the journal even more. "You hid this from me. For 7 years. 7 years, Emma." His words hit me like a slap. I wanted to explain, to justify, but nothing I said seemed to make a difference. "I didn't hide it," I insisted weakly. I didn't think it mattered. It was so long ago." James laughed bitterly and vigorously shook his head. "Didn't you know it was important?" "Are you serious? It is not something one wakes up one morning and decides to ignore. You are aware of how much honesty is dear to me. You knew, Emma, but you thought it wise to keep this to yourself." "I wasn't trying to keep secrets," I said, my voice cracking. I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" He began getting louder, and I could see anger and disappointment at the situation, and me in his young eyes. "Do you even hear yourself? You did not hurt me, so you have been telling me lies. Wait, did you hear how screwed up that is?" I tried to reach for him, but he pulled away, pacing the room with the journal still in his hands. "This changes everything," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Everything I thought I knew about you, about us. Was it all a lie?" "No, James," I said desperately. "It wasn't a lie. I love you. I've always loved you." He stopped pacing and turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. "If you loved me, you would have told me. You would have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Instead, you let me build a life with someone who couldn't even be honest about something this big." I didn't know what to say. I found myself wanting to say something, and every time I spoke, it felt like I was only making matters worse. I didn't know how to tell you. I was now crying as I spoke to him. I was scared. "Scared of what?" he demanded. of me, or of facing the consequences of your own actions. His words made me feel like someone had punched my stomach. I think it occurred to me that he was angry, yes, but he was also really, really hurt in a manner that I had never really witnessed before. And the worst of this? I know I did this. James sat down on the edge of the attic, his head in his hands. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said quietly. Hearing those words broke me. I wanted to fix it, to say something that would make him understand that I never meant for any of this to happen. But how could I? How could I convince him of anything when I wasn't even sure I believed myself anymore? The room fell silent except for the sound of my quiet sobs. James stood up, clutching the journal, and walked toward the door. "I need time to think," he said, his voice cold and distant. And just like that, he was gone. After the confrontation, James barely spoke to me. He was still at home, physically present, but emotionally it was like he had disappeared. He avoided eye contact, kept his answers short, and spent most of his time in the guest room. It felt like he was trying to put as much distance as possible between us, even while we were under the same roof. I tried to talk to him, to apologize again, but it was like talking to a wall. He wasn't angry in the way you'd expect. There was no shouting or slamming doors. Instead, there was this cold silence that hung in the air, suffocating and unbearable. Then, one morning, I woke up to find James standing by the front door, a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I panicked. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't look at me when he answered. "I need some space." "James, please," I begged. "We can work through this. Don't just leave." But he didn't stop. "I'll call when I'm ready to talk," he said quietly before walking out the door. And just like that, he was gone. At first, I told myself he just needed a few days to cool off. He'd come back. He always came back. But as the hours turned into days, and the days into weeks, the reality of the situation started to sink in. I called him over and over again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I left messages, sent texts, but there was no response. I even tried reaching out to his family and friends, hoping someone might know where he was, but no one had seen or heard from him. Every lead turned into a dead end. The silence was unbearable. I felt like I was losing my mind, replaying every moment of our relationship, and wondering how I had let it come to this. I found myself going back to the journal, flipping through the pages like some masochistic ritual. The words stared back at me, cold and unchanging, a reminder of the reckless, selfish decisions I had made in college. The worst part was knowing how avoidable this all was. I could have told James the truth when we were dating, when we first started building our life together, but I didn't. I convinced myself it was ancient history, that it wouldn't matter, and now that choice was haunting me in the worst possible way. As I sat alone in the quiet of our house, memories of James flooded my mind. He was the kind of man who always put others first. I thought about the countless ways he had shown me love over the years, the way he stayed up late to help me finish a project for work, the way he planned surprise date nights when he knew I was stressed, the way he always made me feel safe and supported, even when I didn't deserve it. James wasn't just a good husband, he was a good person. He volunteered at local shelters during the holidays, always made time for his friends, and never hesitated to lend a hand to someone in need. He was selfless, loyal, and kind in a way that felt rare in today's world. And now, because of me, he is gone. The guilt was overwhelming. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had betrayed his trust, not just by what I did in college, but by hiding it from him for so long. I knew how much honesty meant to him. He had told me that from the very beginning. And yet, I had convinced myself that keeping this secret was better than risking our relationship. I was wrong. I started to see the cracks in my own behavior, the ways I had taken James for granted. He had given me everything, his love, his trust, his unwavering support, and I had thrown it away for the sake of protecting my own image. As the days dragged on, my fear grew. What if he didn't come back? What if this was the end? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had pushed him too far, that the damage I had done was irreparable. The house felt emptier with each passing day, a hollow shell of what it used to be. I would sit on the couch, staring at the door, hoping it would open and James would walk in, ready to forgive me, ready to try again. But the door stayed closed. At night, I lay awake, haunted by the sound of his voice during that last conversation. I need some space. Those words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of how far I had driven him away. I didn't know what to do. Every attempt to reach out felt like screaming into the void. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except the growing fear that I had lost James for good. And maybe I had. After days of silence and spiraling thoughts, I decided to turn to Reddit for advice. I thought maybe strangers on the internet could offer some clarity, some way to help me fix the mess I'd created. So I poured my heart out in a post, explaining everything. The journal, the mistake, James's disappearance. I admitted my faults, hoping someone would tell me what to do. But the response wasn't what I expected. The comments came flooding in, and they were brutal. "What did you expect?" one person wrote. "You lied to him for 7 years. No one's going to stick around after that kind of betrayal." Another said, "James deserves better. You've been selfish, and now you're facing the consequences." I tried to keep reading, but the words stung. Each comment was like a punch to the gut, calling out every mistake I'd made and every way I'd let James down. Some people suggested I give him space, while others told me I'd already lost him. A few were downright cruel, saying I didn't deserve forgiveness. At first I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that I wasn't a bad person, that I had just made a mistake. But as I kept reading, I realized they were right. Every harsh word, every accusation, it was all true. I had lied, I had betrayed James's trust, and now I was facing the consequences. Their comments forced me to confront the reality I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about the journal. This was about the years I had spent keeping the truth from him, the years I had allowed him to believe in a version of me that wasn't entirely real. As I sat there staring at my screen, memories of James started to flood my mind. I remembered the early days of our relationship, how he had always been so open with me. He used to say, "Trust is everything, Emma. Without it, there's nothing." I had always nodded along, agreeing with him, but I never truly understood what he meant until now. James had warned me, in his own way. He had told me how much honesty meant to him, how betrayal was something he could never forgive. And yet, I had ignored those warnings, convincing myself that my secret didn't matter. I told myself it wasn't important, that it was better to leave the past in the past. But now, I could see how wrong I was. I started to reflect on all the choices I had made, all the little decisions that had led to this moment. I thought about the times James had asked me about my past, how I had always danced around the truth, offering vague answers that I hoped would satisfy him. I thought about the nights we spent talking about our dreams and our future, and how I had silently prayed he would never uncover the parts of my life I wasn't proud of. And then there were the happy times, the moments that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I remembered the way James used to look at me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I remembered our first anniversary, when he surprised me with a weekend trip to the mountains because he knew how much I loved the outdoors. I remembered the way he held my hand during difficult times, always reassuring me that we could get through anything together. Those memories were like daggers, cutting deeper with each one. I realized how much I had taken him for granted, how I had let my own fears and insecurities overshadow the love and trust he had given me so freely. I thought about the night he found the journal, the look on his face, as he read the words I had written so many years ago. It wasn't just anger or hurt, it was betrayal. It was the realization that the person he thought he knew, the person he had built a life with, had been hiding something from him all along. And now, as I sat in the emptiness of our home, I finally understood the full weight of what I had done. It wasn't just the journal or the mistake itself. It was the years of dishonesty, the years of pretending that the truth didn't matter. The comments on my Reddit post kept replaying in my mind, their blunt honesty forcing me to confront my own actions. One comment stood out. "You didn't just break his trust. You shattered the foundation of your relationship. And that's not something you can fix overnight if you can fix it at all." They were right. I had broken something so fundamental, so essential to our marriage, that I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. And for the first time, I began to truly grasp the depth of my own failure, not just to James, but to myself and the life we had built together. I sat there for hours, scrolling through the comments, rereading the journal, and replaying the memories of our life together. The more I reflected, the more I realized that this wasn't just about losing James. It was about losing the person I had always wanted to be. I had spent so much time trying to hide my mistakes, trying to protect my image, that I had lost sight of what really mattered: honesty, trust, and the love we had shared. And now I was left with nothing but regret and the painful understanding that some mistakes can't be undone. It had been weeks since James walked out the door, and I was clinging to the hope that he would come back, that we could have the conversation we needed to begin fixing things. But when he finally returned, it wasn't at all what I had imagined. I heard the door open late in the evening, and for a moment my heart leapt. I rushed to the front hall, expecting to see the man I loved, ready to forgive me, or at least talk things through. Instead, James stood there, calm but cold, holding a stack of papers in his hand. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but devoid of any warmth. I nodded, my stomach in knots, as I followed him into the living room. He sat down across from me, placed the papers on the coffee table, and looked me in the eye. "I've taken some time to think," he began, "and I've made my decision." I opened my mouth to speak, to plead with him to hear me out, but he raised a hand to stop me. "No, Emma," he said firmly. "You've had your chances to explain. Now it's my turn." He picked up the papers and slid them across the table toward me. My hands trembled as I picked them up and scanned the words. Divorce papers. My vision blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. "James, no," I whispered. "Please, we can fix this." But he shook his head. "No, we can't. I've spent the past few weeks thinking about everything about us, about the life we built, and about the lies you've been keeping from me. And I realized something. I can't do this anymore." His tone was measured, but every word felt like a dagger. "Emma, when I married you, I believed in you. I believed in the person you showed me you were. But now I see that person doesn't exist. You've been hiding this from me for 7 years. 7 years of lies, of letting me believe we were building something real, while you carried this secret." I tried to interrupt, to tell him how sorry I was, but he wasn't finished. "You didn't just betray me with what you did in college. You betrayed me by hiding it, by deciding for me what I should or shouldn't know. That's not love, Emma. That's selfishness." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had braced myself for anger, for yelling, but the calm, calculated way he spoke was somehow worse. It was as if he had completely detached himself from me, from us. Then he dropped the bombshell. "Over the past few weeks, I've been gathering everything I need for this divorce. Our finances, our communications, everything. I wanted to make sure I wasn't making a decision out of anger, that I was thinking clearly, and now I am." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "What do you mean, gathering everything?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I've gone through our past emails, texts, everything. I wanted to understand if there was any other part of our life that wasn't what I thought it was. And while I didn't find any more secrets, what I did find made one thing clear. You never gave me the full version of yourself. You always held back." His words stung, but what he said next left me reeling. "I've worked with my lawyer to ensure that this divorce reflects the reality of our relationship. You don't get to walk away from this like nothing happened, Emma. You don't get to take half of everything when you've been lying to me this whole time." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. "James, No," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "You don't get to explain anymore. This isn't about me being angry or hurt. This is about me finally seeing you for who you are, and I can't unsee it." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. I wanted to argue, to beg him to reconsider, but I knew it was pointless. He had made up his mind, and there was no turning back. "James," I said through my tears, "I love you. Please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can." He stood up, cutting me off. "Love isn't supposed to feel like this, Emma. It's not supposed to be built on lies. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine." With that, he turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused and looked back at me one last time. "I hope you figure out who you are, Emma, but I can't be the one to wait around while you do." And then he was gone. I sat there, clutching the divorce papers, feeling like my entire world had crumbled around me. James had been my rock, the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But now, all I had left was a stack of papers and the hollow realization that I had lost him for good. Update: after James walked out that final time, my life began to unravel in ways I never could have imagined. The divorce moved too quickly. James had planned everything meticulously, and there was no room for negotiation. He was calm and firm through the entire process, which somehow made it even harder. Once the papers were signed, I had to leave the home we built together. I packed up my things, every item a painful reminder of the life I thought I'd have with him. Moving out felt like losing a part of myself. That house had been our sanctuary, filled with laughter, shared dreams, and quiet evenings that now felt like a distant memory. But it wasn't just the house I lost. Our mutual friends slowly drifted away too. Some sided with James, understandably upset about my betrayal. Others simply faded into the background, unsure how to navigate the fallout. I couldn't blame them. How do you defend someone who's so clearly in the wrong? Even my sense of identity was shattered. I used to be James's wife, part of a team, part of something bigger than myself. Without him, I felt like a shadow of the person I once was. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror. In a desperate moment, I reached out to James. I thought maybe if we could just talk, if I could explain myself one more time, there might still be hope. I called him, and to my surprise, he picked up. "James, please," I said, my voice trembling. "Can we meet? I just need to talk to you." He paused before responding. "Emma, I don't think that's a good idea." "Just once," I begged. "I know I've made mistakes, but I need you to understand how sorry I am. I still love you." His voice was calm but firm, just as it had been during the divorce. "Emma, I've moved on. I can't keep reopening this wound. I deserve better, and so do you. But that doesn't mean I'll ever forget what happened. It's over." His words hit me like a brick wall. He had moved on, and there was no place for me in his life anymore. The finality of it all sank in, and for the first time, I truly accepted that there was no going back. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life, but it felt impossible. Every corner of my new, smaller apartment reminded me of what I had lost. I found myself replaying memories of James over and over, torturing myself with thoughts of what could have been if I had just been honest from the start. I started to see myself more clearly, and it wasn't a pretty picture. I realized that my actions hadn't just hurt James, they had changed me. The woman I used to be, the one James fell in love with, was gone. In her place was someone who had lied, betrayed, and let fear dictate her decisions. And the journal, that stupid journal, it had once been a place where I poured out my thoughts, my hopes, my mistakes, but now it felt like a curse. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, yet I couldn't bear to look at it either. It was a constant reminder of how the truth always finds a way out, no matter how deeply you try to bury it. The worst part wasn't losing James, the house, or even the life we had built. It was knowing that I had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to me. I had taken his love, his trust, and his kindness, and I had crushed them under the weight of my own selfishness. As I sit here now writing this, I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll find a way to forgive myself. Maybe I'll learn from this and become a better person. But for now, all I have is regret. I can't undo what's been done. James is gone, and the life I thought I had is gone with him. This journal was my secret, but now it's my curse, a reminder that the truth always finds a way out, no matter how deeply you try to bury it.